Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Driving Electric webinar. My name is Duncan McDougall. I'm the chair of Waterbury LEAP, the Local Energy Action Partnership. We're a town energy committee in Waterbury, operating since 2007. And our town energy committee, like many others across Vermont, holds a lot of public events to help Vermonters learn about green energy options. But in this new COVID-19 environment, such public events are not possible. In April, we were going to hold our annual LEAP Energy Fair, which typically draws about 700 people, but that was canceled. And this evening, actually, we were scheduled to have our third LEAP Energy Fest, or at least Electric Vehicle Fest, that was going to take place at a local school. But even though we're socially distanced, we know that people still want to learn about the benefits of electric vehicles and the options available and how to proceed. So we decided to hold a webinar instead. And LEAP is delighted to be partnering with Dave Roberts and Drive Electric Vermont on this event. LEAP and Drive Electric Vermont have partnered many times over the past years. And Dave has put together a great presentation. We hope you find it informative and useful, and we hope it helps you move forward with an electric vehicle. And lastly, I encourage you to visit the Drive Electric Vermont website. They have some great materials that would really help you as you're trying to make a decision. So thanks for joining us this evening, and I'm going to pass it over to Dave.
Great, thanks Duncan, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you joining us this evening. I know it's a beautiful day in Vermont, so I'm glad you can join us. And for those who are maybe running a bit late or wishing they were outside still, we are recording this, so it will be made available to everyone who's registered. So you'll have it as a reference, and if you need to step away and don't want to miss something, stay tuned for the link to the recording. My name is Dave Roberts. I'm the Drive Electric Vermont coordinator. I work at VEIC, which is a nonprofit based in Winooski, Vermont. Been working on EV programs in Vermont for, I guess, about 8 years now. So really happy to be part of this COVID shift to the webinar format. I kind of missed the in-person events, of course, but still good to be getting this information out to you all. So we're going to just start with a quick poll through the GoToWebinar system. I'm going to bring that up, and we just want to find out a little bit more about who's on the line this evening. So you should see a poll on your screen, and if you can just check any of those boxes representing who you are and why you're joining us this evening, what your interests are. Give people a minute or so to check those boxes before we share that response. And about 2/3 of you have voted. Thank you. All right, so just going to give you a few more seconds. Okay, we're up to about 80%, so I'm going to close this and let's see here. We've got a good number of you all are looking for just more information. Some of you are thinking about buying, some of you are EV owners, and some of you are with energy committees, and probably several of you are a combination of all of those. So good to know that a lot of you are just interested. So hopefully we'll answer some of your questions in the presentation that I'm going to run through. But if we don't answer them in the presentation, we are planning to have time for Q&A. And so hold your questions, or you can send them through the chat system. And as we wrap the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to start responding to those. So just a quick overview of the presentation then. Going to run through some of the different types of plug-in electric vehicles, how they work, talk about EV charging, some of the market trends that we're seeing here in Vermont, some of the different incentives that are available, along with different ways of going about getting one, so purchase considerations. We'll hear from 3 EV owners about their personal experiences driving around Vermont, and then the time for Q&A will be at the end. So why do we care about transportation efficiency and electric vehicles in Vermont? Well, transportation is the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. We know that probably some of this may be adjusting a bit with COVID and people driving less, but long term, this has been the case for many years. The transportation has been the largest source, and as of the most recent state inventory update, is accounting for about 45% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. And electric vehicles are much more efficient than gasoline vehicles. So that's a critical thing to keep in mind if you're talking about being more energy efficient and renewable and reducing carbon emissions, is that the electric motors in electric vehicles are about 2 to 3 times more efficient than a gasoline internal combustion engine. And then when you factor in on top of that, that they can be powered by renewable energy, solar, hydro, and other sources for very low carbon emissions, even when you factor in that sort of upstream, we start to see that EVs are one way to address some of our transportation emission challenges. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that they're not the only way, and there's certainly other very important things that need to be addressed to improve transportation efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You know, obviously, if we're all still stuck in traffic, if we're driving EVs, we're going to be more efficient, but it's still not a very good use of our community space, and not a great way to enjoy the lifestyle that we have in Vermont. So thinking about how do we get more walking and bicycling, which has been great to see some of the streets shutting down to vehicles or reduce vehicle traffic and opening up to pedestrians and bicyclists in the last 2 months is really great. So hopefully some of that work will be continuing as we evolve to whatever the new normals are going to look like moving forward. So 2 basic types of plug-in electric vehicles. There are the all-electric models, which are powered solely by a battery. Depending on the size of the battery in the vehicle, you're typically getting about 70 to over 300 miles of range before you need to plug it in and recharge. And then the second type is a plug-in hybrid. So this is typically they have a smaller battery than an all-electric, and they can go anywhere from 15 to 80 miles on the battery. And then they can run on gasoline as long as you need. So you can maybe do your daily commute and your around town travel on battery most of the time, but then if you need to go on a longer trip, you have that flexibility and you can just stop and refuel at a gas station for a road trip, and you don't need to think about where you're charging and things of that sort. So both very popular options, and it just depends on your sort of household and what your travel needs are in terms of what works best, what might work best for you. Here are some of the more popular models that we see in Vermont these days. So there are currently about 40 models available, and there's a handout in the webinar, and our Drive Electric Vermont website has information on all of those models, but just pulling out a few to mention and show you. The Nissan Leaf has 2 different, there's a Leaf and then the Leaf Plus, which has a higher range. So you're talking about 150 to 225 miles of official range, and the price varies between about $30,000 and $37,000 before any incentives are applied. The Tesla Model 3 similarly has some different battery options, can go anywhere from 250 to 320-ish miles officially. The more expensive versions have all-wheel drive, which is something that a lot of Vermonters are looking for. The Chevrolet Bolt on the bottom left is currently the range has improved with the 2019 model from about 220 miles to now 260 in the 2020 model year rather. And that starts at about $37,000 before any incentives or discounts. On the right side are some of the plug-in hybrids. Toyota Prius Prime has a 25-mile electric range, and then it gets about 50 miles per gallon running on gasoline beyond that. Costs about $28,000 before incentives. The Mitsubishi Outlander is another all-wheel drive option, has about just over 20 miles of range. And then the Subaru Crosstrek Hybrid has a little bit less range, has very similar battery and motor system as the Prius Prime. Subaru is partnering with Toyota on their plug-in electric vehicle models, and is about $35,000 starting price. So as I mentioned, on the Drive Electric Vermont website, we've got resources with more information. This is just a shot from our Vehicle Explorer, and at the top you can see there are different filters for vehicle type, so all electric or plug-in hybrid, electric range. So this is currently showing the models that have 200 plus miles of range, all-wheel drive, the price, the number of seats, whether it's eligible for a state of Vermont incentive, which we'll talk more about shortly. And so you can click on the little plus sign on the cards that come up on that page, and you'll see an expanded view that provides a little more detail, and then a link to the manufacturer website where they go into a lot more depth about the specifications for the vehicles and different prices and things of that sort. So that's all on driveelectricvt.com. Some new models that aren't entirely showing on the Drive Electric website because they're not all available just yet. The Tesla Model Y has just come out, and that is on the DEV website now. It's about $50,000 starting price. Tesla expects it to be one of their most popular models. So the crossover and small SUV is currently about 80% of Vermont's new vehicle market. So a lot of people are looking for those types of that style of vehicle. So great to have another option there. Some other ones that are supposed to be coming. Originally, these were all supposed to be launching this year. Some of them may be delayed to 2021 because of COVID-related automaker shutdowns and retooling, but still all on the drawing board for some time in the next year or so. So others are the Mustang Mach-E, an all-electric from Ford, the Ford Escape, which will be a front-wheel drive plug-in hybrid, the VW ID4 on the bottom left, which will be a all-wheel drive, sort of crossover style, long-range all-electric. And then the Toyota RAV4 Prime, which will be a plug-in hybrid version of the RAV4. So some models that we're all looking forward to. And as these are officially released by the automakers, we'll be updating the Drive Electric website with information on them. Some other electric options just to keep in mind, electric buses. This Burlington Green Mountain Transit has 2 electric buses that have been in use for, I guess, about 2 or 3 months now. They just launched earlier this year, just the start. There's several more electric transit and school buses coming to Vermont in the next few years through Volkswagen and other grant programs, Volkswagen diesel settlement funds and other programs. Electric bicycles are a great option. There are incentives available for those. A lot of people rediscovering biking these days with less traffic on the roads, and electric can give you that little bit of extra boost you might want to get up hills. CarShare Vermont, based in Burlington, has an electric Leaf, all-electric Leaf. There's electric lawn care options. This is on the bottom left. That's a commercial electric mower. There are some landscaping companies that are starting to use these models, and of course a lot of homeowners are using much more smaller models for their backyards and such, and there are incentives available for those from utilities as well. And electric motorcycles, Harley Davidson, Zero, there are other companies working on electric motorcycles, so it doesn't all have to be about your own personal vehicle. There's many options out there to go electric. EVs and Vermont conditions. So this is a question we get a lot. How do batteries perform in cold weather? And the short answer is it depends on your vehicle and how cold it is, but typically anywhere from a 20 to 40% reduction in range is what we see with most vehicles. So you can do some things to improve the range by preheating vehicles while they're still plugged in, slowing down a little bit, not using the cabin heat. Most EVs will have a heated seats and maybe heated steering wheel. So if you can use that instead of cabin ventilation heat, that will save some of the battery because it's more efficient to just heat those surfaces that way. So we can talk more in the Q&A about it, but that is something that's really important to keep in mind, that those official automaker range estimates, so like a Chevrolet Bolt that officially gets 260 miles of range, on the worst case frigid Vermont winter morning when it's -10 Fahrenheit, you might be looking at closer to 140, 150 mile range. So for most people, it's still plenty. It's very rare that anybody gets stranded. Very unusual that we hear about that. But something that you need to know going in is that you will get less range in those cold conditions. And hopefully this is something that automakers will be improving on as time goes on with different battery chemistries and heating systems that won't have that same loss in the coldest conditions. So thinking about EV charging, there's sort of 3 different locations where most people are charging. Home, by far and away, is the most popular place. If you can plug it into either a standard wall outlet or what's called a level 2 charger, which we'll talk about in a moment, that's where most people do most of their charging. If you have access to charging at your workplace, understanding that these days not many people are going into work, but if you do start commuting again, there are options to work with your employer to explore workplace charging. Many of the utilities have incentives that can support that. And then public charging is something that most EV drivers don't use on a daily basis, but they want it to provide a safety net. And if they need to go on a longer trip, then public charging becomes obviously an important consideration. So in terms of the different levels of charging, we've got level 1 charging, which is on the left here. It's just plugging into a standard 120 volt home outlet. That'll give you about 5 miles of range per hour charging. So for someone with a plug-in hybrid like the Prius Prime that gets 25 miles of range, you can just plug it in and it'll be ready when you get home. It'll be ready to go in the morning after about 5 hours of charging, sometime overnight. So works great for plug-in hybrids. For the longer range all electrics like a Tesla or Bolt or Hyundai Kona, you would be talking about a few days to get a full charge if the battery was completely depleted. So not as convenient in that context. So a lot of people will consider level 2 charging, which is in the middle. The unit on the right there is something that would plug into a 240 volt receptacle and give you, depending on the vehicle and the charging equipment, between 10 and 20 miles of range per hour charging. So your 200-mile EV could charge, within 10 hours or overnight in most cases. The unit on the left is an example of what you might see out in public, where you can swipe a membership card or your credit card or use your phone smart payment system to unlock it and use that public charging, and those often will charge a fee, usually around $1 an hour or so to charge up. And then on the right side is DC fast charging, which is much more rapid. It's 480 volts, depending on the unit. This one here is a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger, which for most vehicles that can use it, you're talking about an 80% charge in 30 to 60 minutes. So much more convenient for longer distance road trips and things of that sort. We do have pretty good availability of public charging in the Northeast these days. There's still some gaps. This map is from a website called plugshare.com, which we highly recommend for anybody wanting to explore where charging is. We do have a charging map on the Drive Electric website as well, and we link to this PlugShare one. The orange dots are the fast chargers. So there's about 25 fast chargers in Vermont at this point, and we should be seeing about 10 more, hopefully in the next year or so, as the state continues to invest Volkswagen diesel settlement funds. And some of those are going to be going to close gaps, say, in the Northeast Kingdom area and other parts of the state that don't have good coverage for fast charging. great thing about PlugShare is that you can see if other people have used the charging equipment recently. So it's sort of like a Yelp system for charging. So if there's an outage or a maintenance issue, oftentimes you can see that and plan ahead accordingly before you count on it if you're going on a longer distance trip. In terms of costs, charging up at home, and should be clear that this is home charging that we're comparing to gasoline. At least pre-COVID and the rapid decline in gasoline prices, we were looking at about a $2,000 savings in fuel costs over 5 years. And this is just on the fuel costs, not to mention some of the potential maintenance savings through, for example, all electric vehicles don't have oil changes. There's nothing like that. So typically have less maintenance. Even with the fuel prices going down of late, charging on electricity, charging your EV on home electricity is equivalent about $1.50 a gallon gasoline. So prices on gas would have to keep dropping and stay there for a long time to always make up for the potential savings that you would get going electric. And in terms of where we're at in Vermont these days, so as of January, we had about 3,700 EVs registered, and that includes both the all-electric and plug-in hybrid models. And there's a little bit more. The plug-in hybrids initially were the more popular models, and as time has gone on and we see the longer range all-electric vehicles like the Tesla Model 3, the Chevrolet Bolt, the Leaf Plus, Hyundai Kona. So those longer distance all electrics are starting to sell more quickly than the plug-in hybrids that are out there. And it's great to see this level of growth. But even at 3,700 total in January 2020, the state does have a 2025 goal to get to 10% renewably powered transportation, which require somewhere around 50,000 EVs. So we've got our work cut out for us the next several years to try to meet those state goals to increase the efficiency of our vehicles. So shifting gears to purchase incentives. So there's a few things to talk about here, and there is a handout on incentives that runs through these, and we do have this information on the website as well. But starting at the top with the federal tax credit, it's up to $7,500 based on the vehicle battery size. And this begins to disappear when an automaker reaches 200,000 EV sales. So Tesla and Chevrolet passed that threshold, and there are currently no federal tax credit incentives available for Tesla or General Motors vehicles. So unfortunately, there has been talk of extending that federal tax credit to a higher number per automaker in Congress, and Congressman Peter Welch has introduced legislation that would do that, but the prospects of passage are uncertain at best, so certainly wouldn't rely on that moving forward. It is a tax credit, so it's something you need to claim on your income taxes unless you lease the vehicle, in which case the leasing company technically owns it and they get the benefit of the tax credit, and they usually will pass through the savings or the incentive amount in terms of a reduced down payment or monthly payment. It does not carry over if you're claiming it yourself. If you purchase and do not lease, it does not carry over into future years the way some other tax credit programs do. So you need to make sure if you're relying on this that you have enough tax liability in the year you buy your EV and put it into service that you can get the full benefit. The next incentive is from the state of Vermont. So this is a program that the Vermont Agency of Transportation is overseeing, or VTrans. It started with about $1.1 million in funding, launched in December of 2019. Right now, there's around $550,000 remaining, and it is for new EVs, so not used, for new EVs with a starting base price under $40,000. And there's information on the website about which vehicles are eligible, but an example would be the Tesla Model 3 has a base price under $40,000. So even if you get a Model 3 that costs $50,000 with all-wheel drive, because it's based on the model eligibility, you're still eligible for a state incentive for that vehicle. There is an income screening requirement, so it's for households at or below about $95,000 annual total income, and it's being distributed in partnership with electric utilities. So if you go to a participating car dealer, they'll pass through that state incentive to you, and then work with your electric utility. You'll sign a form at the dealership, and they'll submit that to your electric utility for them to be reimbursed. You can also get a direct incentive by following the instructions on the Drive Electric website, in which case you file that paperwork directly with your utility. There is a higher incentive for lower income households, or what the state calls weatherization eligible. So that doesn't mean that you've completed a weatherization, which is a home insulation type of project to reduce your heating bills. It just means you're eligible for that. And it's about, for a two-person household, it's about $50,000, give or take, to be eligible for those weatherization programs. And it does mean a significant boost in the incentive amount. So for a plug-in hybrid, if you're eligible for the sort of base incentive, which means your household income is at or below $96,122, you'll get $1,500 for a plug-in hybrid. But if you're eligible for weatherization program, that goes up to $4,000. And similarly, for the all-electric vehicles, the base incentive is $2,500, and that doubles to $5,000 for lower income households. There is, in addition, so these are state incentives for new vehicles. There is also Capstone Community Action is working on a state program called Mileage Smart, which is providing incentives for high efficiency used vehicles to low income households. And so they do have some plug-in models that are eligible for that program. And if you look up Capstone Mileage Smart, you can find more information on that, or we can try to field any questions if people want to talk more about that following the presentation. This is just a list of the eligible vehicles. As I said, this is on the Drive Electric website, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but it is about 23 models currently, and if new models are introduced to the state that meet the under $40,000 starting price, then we will be updating this list accordingly to make those eligible. In addition, so we talked about the federal tax credit and the state incentives, and then the third level are your electric utility incentives. Green Mountain Power is offering $1,500 on new all-electric or $1,000 for plug-in hybrid. Also for used EV, they'll provide $750. They provided extra $1,000 for low and moderate income households getting all-electric vehicle. And they also will provide free home level 2 charging equipment if you can pay for the installation. So they provide the equipment, they don't cover the installation for that. And it does need to be connected to Wi-Fi so they can control it and make sure that charging is happening off-peak hours. We also have on the slide a little info on the Vermont Electric Co-op incentive program, which is $500 on a new or used all-electric, or $250 on a plug-in hybrid. And we have all the utility programs in detail on our website, as well as on the handout in the webinar. I just mentioned that Burlington Electric Department is boosting their incentives, planning to boost their incentives for a green stimulus offering in response to COVID. So they're going to be going from $1,200 for an all-electric to $1,800, and $1,200 for a plug-in hybrid to $1,500. So some nice additional incentives that should be, they're not, they've announced that they're coming, but they haven't set an exact date on when those will be available yet. So we'll certainly update our resources as that information becomes clear. So when you factor in all the different incentives that are available, this is just a quick comparison showing a Nissan Leaf and a Nissan Sentra. The Leaf has a starting price around $30,000, but if you knock out the $7,500 tax credit, a $2,500 state incentive, which is sort of not the lower income, just the standard incentive amount, and then the fleet tail discount. So many electric utilities have been partnering with Nissan on additional discounts that are available at the dealership, up to $5,000 over the past several years. So, and then adding on top of that, the $1,500 utility incentive, so you can get a brand new Nissan Leaf if you qualify for all these incentives for about $13,500, which is several $1,000s less than a kind of basic Nissan Sentra. So there are some great values available once you start combining all these incentives. So with that, we're going to bring up our first guest this evening. So Michael Frank has been driving a Tesla Model 3. And Michael, if you're on, I invite you to join and share a little bit about your experience.
Hi, everybody. So I purchased a Tesla Model 3 back in November of 2018. I now have 54,423 miles on the car. I love the car. Those that know me know I'm a major Tesla evangelist, and some of you probably have met me doing different events around the state. So I have the all-wheel drive, long-range version of the Model 3. As you can see in the photo there, I have a roof rack, Tesla roof rack, and I can put a Thule on top. And I've just added a hitch on the back so I can put bicycles on the back. This is our vehicle that we go skiing with. We bring the family. It is excellent in the snow. The all-wheel drive, being electric, it responds instantly. And so it's actually a lot of fun to drive in the snow, and I have a lot of fun driving up the mountain J Peak around the corners on the snow-covered road. One great thing I love about the Teslas is it is so easy to drive almost anywhere. As you can see on the right side, that is the Tesla supercharger locations. All the red ones are existing ones, and the gray ones are ones that are planned in the works. I know the ones across North Dakota there are in permits or installation right now. So you can drive anywhere. And people ask me how long does it take to charge up. Normally, I stop for somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, and I can get 150 miles of range. I've done multiple long-distance trips. We went to, that first year, Thanksgiving, we went to Ohio, and we drove back from Columbus, Ohio to Waterbury, Vermont in one day. And it was easy. The car tells you where to stop. You can do some more planning if you want. There's certain places you like to plan, but you drive up, you back up. Most of the spots are back up. There are some pull forward spots for the superchargers for those that have more difficulty backing up, but you grab the cable, you plug it in, and you walk away. They're at convenient locations. So this one was actually a casino. So I did not play games there, but different places have different facilities there. And my wife and I actually did a road trip where we went all the way out to St. Louis, Missouri. Maybe a little crazy, but we slept in the car. We actually laid down in the back seats flat, had a mattress in there, and window coverings, and we drove, and we would just either stop at campgrounds or sometimes literally actually in a hotel parking lot because there's a Tesla charger there. And slept in the car and just had a great time traveling around the country, and went up to Toronto and across Canada as well. I charge at home mostly. It's really easy. I pull into my garage, I plug it in, and I walk away. And the only maintenance I've had to pay for on the car is I had to get winter tires, and I went through one set of tires and alignments because Vermont roads and dirt. So I love it. My wife and I, our next vehicle is, we hope to replace our Honda Odyssey van with a Tesla, either Model Y or the Cybertruck, depending upon the timing for when we pull the trigger. One last thing with it, the Tesla has autopilot and full self-driving capabilities. And so driving across the country, it's literally, I put my hand on the steering wheel, look forward, and the car drives. It changes lanes, it takes exits, and it works really, really well. On our trip, 99% plus was autopilot. I actually drove once back from New Jersey where the car did 100% of the highway driving. Of course, you have to pay attention. And unlike any other vehicle I've gotten, this car is actually faster than the day I bought it. It got a little speed upgrade, and it has more features because Tesla does over-the-air updates. So it's great. So I love it. That's my experience.
Great, thank you, Michael. So one question that often comes up is Tesla doesn't have dealerships. So you order online and it gets delivered to you. If you have maintenance issues, how do you deal with that?
Yep. So yeah, my car was ordered online. They delivered it to me right in front of my house in Waterbury Center, Vermont. Sometimes, depending upon time, you might go down to pick it up. So a lot of service can be done by Tesla Mobile Service. My car was was an earlier model, so I had a few different issues. Vermont, Northern Vermont's covered by Rob. He's out of the Plainfield, Marshfield area. He's got a big Volkswagen tattoo on his arm. He's a really good guy. But he drives Tesla van, and they can do a lot of service at your place. Recently, I actually asked him, like, you must be getting busy with all these Teslas. He's like, no, they're he's more like the knee tag repairman now. The quality's so low, he's not doing a lot of visits. Sometimes I have had to go to a service location I got a full self-driving computer upgrade. I had some glass crack. The Tesla had to fix at the location. So that's the closest ones to us in Vermont are Montreal, when you can actually get there, around Albany, New York, and then there's 2 locations in the Massachusetts suburbs. They're looking at possibly adding more, and hopefully they add something in New Hampshire, Vermont soon.
Great. All right, thanks, Michael. And we'll keep you on the line in case people have more questions when we get to the discussion. Next up, we've got Graham Turk talking about his experience with the Nissan Leaf, and Graham also works on EV programs for Green Mountain Power, so he can help answer any specific questions that folks might have on their programs. So Graham, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks, Dave. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining. We'll talk a little bit about my experience with my Nissan Leaf, which as a Vermont Leaf, I have named Maple. And even though you're all muted, I can imagine you're all laughing at how great of a name that is. So yeah, I got my Leaf about 1.5 years ago. It's been an amazing car for me. It's the only car in my family. I live in Burlington in an apartment. I actually don't even have charging at my apartment. So I do almost all of my charging either at public stations in Burlington, which there are ample and few right around the block for me, or other public locations in the state. I think that the biggest lesson I've learned, as it is my only car and therefore my road trip car, is that planning ahead and leaving a buffer is the way to do it. And so I've taken this car on the right. That picture was on the way to Acadia National Park in Maine. I've gone to visit my family on Long Island, done several trips to Montreal, which don't require any stopping to charge, but the other ones did. And so I used that app that David showed, PlugShare, to stop along the way. This one on the right, it's I think it was at a Hannaford in Maine. And so similar to what Michael was saying, stop for 15, 20, 30 minutes, get a bite to eat, and then be on my way. I think my favorite part about driving it, and since having an EV, especially in Vermont, is the ability to do the preheating and pre-cooling. It's really life-changing to be able to set on an app on my phone the ability to say, I'd like the car to be at 80 degrees at 8 a.m. right when I leave for work. It doesn't idle, and so there's no risk about having it turned on in a garage. And right when I get in the car, it's defrosted, it's toasty, and I can be on my way without having to wait for it to warm up, which on the really cold days is a godsend. This car, so the Nissan Leaf, I have the basic model, so the 150 miles. It does not have four-wheel drive, but I will say that with studded snow tires, I've found that it handles pretty amazingly. It's very has a really low center of gravity because of the weighting and where the battery is. And I've taken it on some pretty rugged roads throughout the state and have had no issue ever with spinning out or not being able to make it up hills. So very, very impressed even without four-wheel drive for how well it handles. And then I think on the last piece, I know David showed the comparison between a Leaf and the Nissan Sentra. That was pretty much exactly what I was looking at when I got this car. I was able to get a Burlington Electric Department rebate as a BED customer, a fleet tail discount from Nissan, federal tax rebate, which I was just able to claim on my tax filing. And so with all of those benefits stacked, and that was before even the state rebate existed, so I didn't even have that benefit. It was already cheaper as a net cost than a comparable new car that I could have gotten from Nissan, like the Sentra. And that's before you even take into account the operating savings from electricity and maintenance. And then the last thing is just on the maintenance piece, I can second what Michael said, that there's very little maintenance to be done. When I bring in my car to get the snow tires swapped, they're typically pretty bummed that they can't sell me many services. These things really do not have many moving parts. They drive really well, and it's been seamless for me. So I'll likewise be on for answering any Q&A. I think for my experience, it's been a great one, and really happy to be driving electric, and happy to let you borrow the car. I know in the current moment, handing off the vehicle might not be the best move, but I'm happy to disinfect it, let you test drive it for a week. I just really want more people to be out there driving EVs, and it's been fun to have one.
Great, thanks so much, Graham. And we do have some more information on GMP's program, so if folks have questions about those, we'll be happy to dive into that further. So thank you. So next up, we've got Washington County Senator Andrew Perchlik, who's driving a Chevrolet Bolt, but is also serving on the Senate Transportation Committee. So he can speak about both his experience driving an EV, and I think he also had a Volt plug-in hybrid before his Bolt. So he's been doing this for a while, and also maybe speak a little bit about some of the state policy issues, understanding that there's a lot of uncertainty right now with COVID. So Mr. Perchlik, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, that's great. And I should have gotten you a real picture of my vehicle like the others did. They had good pictures. So I do have a Bolt, but it's not a red one. It actually looks just like yours that you showed at the beginning. It's a blue one, and there's seem to be a lot of the blue ones around Vermont, I've noticed. It's a 2018 Bolt. We got it in 2018. It's been a great car. We speaking my wife and I, she mainly drives it. For a while, I had the Volt. It was a 2015 Volt that I leased for 3 years, and I extended the lease because I did really enjoy that car. It wasn't the Volt with a V was not a good car for family. I got 3 kids. I have a son that's 6'3". The back seat of the Volt is good for a child's seat, and that's about it. And so it wasn't really practical when our other car became available. So I did let that one go, but then we had the Bolt, and we have really loved it. And we fight over it, who gets to drive the electric car versus our Subaru Legacy. Both of us would much rather be driving the Bolt, even in the winter, even with the Subaru four-wheel drive. We like the Bolt better, and I agree with Graham that one of the best things about it is the preheating. I remember years ago we used to have a minivan with our kids were little that we had the remote starter so that we could have it nice and warm, because we don't have a garage or anything, so that the car would be warm. But we always felt really guilty about it idling. And so it's great that you can get in the car in the winter and it's all warm and defrosted. The steering wheel and the seats are warmed up, and you don't have to feel really guilty about it. And particularly, one of the things that we were surprisingly liked about it the most is the electric heated steering wheel. That I thought was some kind of dumb extra that nobody would really need, but I've been really surprised how nice it feels in the winter to have a warm steering wheel. Whatever electric vehicle you get, you have to make sure you get that. Having the Volt through the winters was really helpful for us to see that an electric car could work in Vermont winters. You know, we lived on a dirt road up a hill, and we never had troubles. We got good snow tires. We didn't get studded tires. We just got good snow tires, and we never had any trouble. And that gave us the confidence. You know, the Volt had the backup generator, but I think when I turned my Volt in after 3.5 years, I had all the miles that were on it were 80% were on just pure electric. So that gave us the confidence to get the Volt, and it's worked good. It's taken some getting used to on the long drives. You know, I'm more of a tech nerd and like playing with the app and finding the charging stations. It's not as slick as the Tesla as far as telling you kind of where to go and things like that. But we've had a couple close calls where we've tried to make longer trips, especially like in a hot summer day when you want to have the air conditioning and you want to get there, so you want to go faster. But then you're halfway there and you realize you're not going to get there, and you don't really want to pull over for 30 minutes. And there's not, like in New Hampshire where we do a lot of driving, there's not a lot of fast chargers available. And so that's been the one kind of drawback, that if you're going to make a long trip, you do have to think about it, especially if you're going to head to, you know, some rural areas. If you're going to stay on the interstate and go to Chicago or something, then I think it's very easy. But we've had some trouble when we've kind of gone over 180 miles, I'd say, and being in a more remote area. But we really loved not having to go to the gas station. Not only the expense that we're saving for the oil exchanges and other maintenance, you know, no transmission fluid, all that, but you also save a lot of time. You don't have to take the car into the station and wait around. We did buy our car from Alderman's because they gave us a better deal than the local Chevy dealer. And they called me recently just on, because after so often they give you a call, and they said, "Oh, your car's up for service." And I was like, "Well, what service would it be?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah, you have an electric car. We don't really have anything. Maybe make sure your tires are filled up." I mean, it's really great to have so little maintenance and feel so positive about the vehicle that you're driving. It's been really great. I'm so happy to talk about the Bolt, but Dave has a Bolt too, so he can talk about it. But on the policy side, one thing that I'd thought of when we were talking about the Tesla repair that Dave brought up that question, one of the issues that I worked on in Senate Transportation this year was to allow Tesla to put a service station in Vermont. Right now, there's a kind of I would call it a quirk in the franchise law that does not allow any manufacturer to build a service center in Vermont. And this is designed to protect the franchisees of like Ford and Chevy, but it also kind of catches Tesla or Rivian, if there's any other manufacturer selling direct to customers, they can't open this. And unfortunately, just people are worried about, the dealers are worried about Tesla and this different model of not having a franchise. And surprising to me how difficult it was to get that passed. I still have some hope that we can get it done this year, but with all this strange legislative scene that we're in now, it might just be a study. But I would encourage people to contact their representatives and senators about allowing Tesla to put in a center, and they want to have a center in here, but right now we're saying you can't, which is really unfortunate. There's a lot of support for state incentives, and in a normal year, I would feel pretty positive about getting some more money for the incentives, but because of the state of the state budget, that's just not going to happen anytime soon until there's a real understanding of how deep a hole we're in and what money we have. I can't see people wanting to budget for incentives. We still have incentives left, as Dave said, around $500,000. The utilities have their incentives. The federal tax credit is still available. So I think all those things are good, but it make it more difficult to get us money since there's still money there. So I'm hopeful that that money gets used and we get more electric cars on the road, and then we can come back next year and really talk about a long-term incentive program, because the money that we put in was from the VW settlement money, and it was understood to be temporary. So we really need a long-term solution on that. But what the state is spending money on car charging stations. We are trying to make that range anxiety go away and have people just start seeing them around more. Have programs for employers to put them in. So I think more and more people that just see them, then they'll feel comfortable as we get off these early adopters that are really excited about it. We need to get these, people that hadn't thought about it just feel really comfortable about it. So we're working on having charging stations in visible spots along the interstates and main traveled roads. And so that'll still continue this year, but I am hoping to continue to work on the transportation committee on a lot of the other little details around electric car charging and how much you would pay, and the issue that we need to figure out is how electric car drivers pay their fair share for the maintenance of the roads and bridges, since we're not paying into the gas. We don't pay gas tax, and that's the main source of our funds. So there's interest in figuring that out, and I have some proposals on that, and that we've been talking about it with AOT and others about a transition phase on how to do that differently, and possibly do it differently for gas-powered vehicles as well. So happy to answer any questions that people have about the policy stuff.
Great. Thanks so much, Sandy. So now is that time for questions, and I know I see several have already come in, so I'm going to go ahead and start running down the list here. But if you have a question, you can please go ahead and send it in. If you're having trouble sending a question, you can try to raise your hand and we can try to unmute you to ask, but given the time we have left, it's probably best to try to just send them in. If we don't get to everybody's questions, we can follow up, and you can always reach out to us at info@driveelectricvt.com or through the contact form on our website, and we're always happy to respond directly. So first question, how many people are in the webinar this evening? So we had about 200 people sign up, and as of right now, we've got about 110 attendees. So pretty good turnout, we think, so very pleased with that. Next question, and because the technology is always changing, is it better to lease or buy? And I think most of the folks who are speaking about their experiences are leasing their vehicles for this reason, and also because the federal tax credit gets rolled into the lease. So it's for folks who maybe aren't sure about whether they can claim that tax credit or not. I guess as I think about it, Graham mentioned that he did claim that tax credit when he did his taxes this year, so he must have bought it. But for folks who aren't sure about that, leasing is a good option. But the Teslas and the new EVs that are out there now with over 200 miles of range, I feel a lot better about people just going ahead and buying those if they know they're going to work for their needs. But do expect to see some significant depreciation, especially on the non-Tesla vehicles. Teslas seem to be holding their value a little bit better, but the non-Tesla vehicles, if you're looking to turn around and sell pretty quickly, then you can expect to see a pretty significant rate of depreciation. At least that's the history so far.
Dave, maybe just a quick follow-up to that. The depreciation, that does mean that there are a lot of really affordable used EVs that are possibly early generation and so lower range, but could be an awesome option if you're a two-car family and have one car for longer trips, and the second one's really for shorter distance driving. So definitely will be more and more very affordable used options as more of these cars come off lease in Vermont.
Yep.
And I just want to add that the number of miles you drive is really important too. I considered leasing a Tesla before, and that would have been the worst mistake for me due to my high mileage driving. We found that this is a car we went everywhere with, so that was part of the consideration too.
Right. typically with leasing, it's set up when you start the lease, but it's usually anywhere from 10 to 15,000 miles per year of lease for maybe typically a 3-year lease. And if you go over that, then there are significant mileage charges. Often it's about 25 cents a mile. So that really adds up if you are a high mileage driver. I want to keep going because we have lots of good questions here. So next one, are utilities still moving forward with advanced rate design, or has COVID slowed that down? And by advanced rate design, we're talking about off-peak rates that basically provide a discounted electric rate at times when it's best for charging on the grid. And Burlington Electric Department has an EV specific rate, which is I think about 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which is roughly, it's a little less than half of their normal rate, I believe. So it's a substantial discount. And I know some of the other utilities have time of use rates, and Green Mountain Power is currently in the process of going through a Public Utility Commission process for an off-peak rate. I don't know, Graham, if there's anything you can add on how that's going.
Sure, yeah. So that is all the material is in, and we're just waiting on a final answer from the PUC on when we can offer those two rates. So it will be two residential charging rates, one a managed charging option where 4 or 5 times a month we will manage the charger and shift charging to later in the evening to avoid a peak. And as the driver and the charger owner, you don't have to do anything. You can always opt out of those events if you need to, but you'd get a benefit in the form of a discounted rate the rest of the hours. So that's one version, and then the other is a more traditional time of use rate where there will be an on-peak and an off-peak period just for the EV charging. And so we'll be using the charging data to do that measurement. So you don't have to have your whole home on a time of use rate to be able to take advantage of that. And as I said, just counting down the days, just waiting on a PUC decision to be able to go live with those two rates.
Great, thank you. Next question, do you have to be connected to the grid, I assume? So if somebody is living off grid, it certainly would be a challenge, but you heard Graham does not have charging available at his home, so he relies mostly on public charging in the area. So it could be done, but it would definitely require some planning and some work in advance to make sure it's actually going to work for you. So you might want to think about a plug-in hybrid to give you a little more flexibility if you're in that situation. Question, why are there different incentives for different utilities? So each utility is filing their own plans to comply with the state's renewable energy standard, and there's what's often referred to as Tier 3 of that, which is requiring utilities to offset their customers' fossil fuel use, which is generally why the utilities are offering these incentives. And the different utilities basically just have different approaches to how they're meeting those Tier 3 requirements. Some of it has to do with how renewable their electric generation is in terms of how much fossil fuels they're then offsetting and what the level of incentives they can offer. I don't know, Andy or Graham, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, that was good. They're all regulated differently and they're independent, so they can try, which is good. And we're gathering data to kind of see what the right level is where we can move customers, but their customers are different. Some are very rural and lower income, and some customers of the utilities are like BD are all more in the city. So
great. So next question, what does it cost to charge with a Tesla supercharger? So Michael, is that one you can take?
Yeah, I can take it. Yeah, so the charge gets the complex charging of some states charging by the minute and some requiring kilowatt hours. So if I do it in New York, usually somewhere kilowatt hour, somewhere around 24 cents a kilowatt hour, so a little more expensive than a lot of infrastructure that goes with it. Vermont by the minute right now, at least for Tesla. So the short answer is usually somewhere between $6 and $10 is what I end up paying at a supercharger. It is less than gas. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And early on, Tesla was offering free supercharging for life with some of their more expensive models. seen that come back from time to time as sort of a special deal, but in general, it's if you're buying a Tesla now, you can expect to be paying something for charging, I believe.
Yeah, the Model S and Model X have supercharging included. The Model 3 and Y do not, unless you use a referral code. So you can talk to me. You can get some miles, but a small little bit. But you know, it's really not a big charger cost. A big part of the cost is it's charging at home is really where you charge for most people.
Yep.
For work.
Great. Thank you. So next question, do DC fast chargers reduce battery life? And what is involved in battery management for maximum life? So it's a lot of nuance to this because it can depend on the vehicle. Vehicles that have liquid cooling systems on the batteries can help pull out the heat that's created when you're fast charging, which is the enemy of battery life. So not all vehicles have liquid cooling. So for example, the Nissan Leaf has an air-cooled battery system. So it's not as robust when it comes to doing a lot of fast charging, especially in hotter climates than Vermont. So if you're living in Arizona or Texas, places like that, there were some issues with some of the earlier model years of the Leaf, and then Nissan changed the chemistry to make it more resilient in those higher temperature conditions. So the I don't know. I mean, it really does depend on the vehicle. Generally, the recommendation is to try to keep your battery within maybe sort of 20 to 80% state of charge, so not fully depleting or not keeping it fully charged for extended periods of time. If you want to charge it all the way up for a longer road trip, that's a good option. But you know, in terms of battery life, those are some of the kind of more general recommendations. There are some studies of battery life in the vehicles. We're still getting history on that. There's still a lot of data that needs to be collected, but there are Teslas with several 100,000 miles that maybe are seeing maybe 10% reduction in range over time, over a period of years with that level of mileage. So overall, I would say that the batteries are holding up a little bit better than what was expected initially. But there are individual circumstances where that may not be the case. So if you are looking at a used EV especially, you definitely want to take a close look at the battery health and make sure that it's going to work for you moving forward. And I know we're a little bit after 8. There's a lot of good questions here, so I'm going to keep going for a few minutes. Hopefully that works for all our panelists. And we'll try to answer as many of these as we can. Apologies if we provide short shrift to anyone's question. So another question here. Do all of the various incentives still apply if the car is purchased out of state? And the general answer is yes, the incentives still apply, although there are some of the Vermont dealers specifically that will pass through the state and utility incentives, depending on the utility. So it just makes it a little more convenient. You don't have to deal with mailing in forms and things of that sort. But all of those incentives should still apply if purchased out of state. Another question about fast charging. Nissan specifically doesn't recommend it, but the owner's manual isn't very clear on what's too much. And yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball. I would say, try not to do it too many times in one day. I know that's been an issue with some. I don't know, Graham, if you have any tips on your experience with fast charging.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think in general, probably just for general battery health, good to avoid it when possible. So if there is a level 2 option or you can plug in overnight and there's no need to fast charge, then fine to avoid. But I haven't had any issue with multiple charges in a day or anything like that. I charged 3 times on the way to Acadia National Park and didn't see any problems. So yeah, I think it's not something you have to worry about all the time. Really only maybe on those road trips, and then if possible, just keeping it to level 2 the rest of the time. But I've only found that maybe 5% of all my charging is level 3, and so it's not like this is a in an everyday dilemma. It's when I do need to go on a road trip, it doesn't really make a big difference. I mean, my indicator, you can look kind of in the car what the battery capacity is compared to when it started, and I haven't lost any of its original capacity in driving it for over a year and a half and fast charging pretty liberally. So yeah, I know that just one data point, but I think with the improved chemistry of the leaf, a lot of those early issues have been resolved.
Yep. Great, thanks. So next question, someone who missed the first half of the session and wondering if leased cars get the credits, and generally the answer is yes. In some cases, some of the utility incentives are a little bit different potentially, but and the federal tax credit should be passed through by the leasing company, so you won't be able to claim that federal tax credit yourself, but the vehicle is still eligible. Question about, do we know if GMP will offer better charging rates? And I think we just heard from Graham a few minutes ago that they're working on that, and hopefully they'll have some news to share very soon.
Yeah, and just real quick there, Dave. So anyone with a compatible charger could sign up for that rate as soon as it goes into effect. And those are the same chargers that we provide free with the purchase or lease of any EV. So when you purchase that vehicle, you'd be getting the charger for no cost, and then could sign up right away with a compatible charger, which all the ones that we provide are. And so it would be pretty seamless, even if you already are an EV owner, have either a charge point or flow or an NLX charger at home.
Great. Someone asking, what kind of chargers do you have at home? And I think that was a great, you already just answered that, Graham, so good call there. Some folks also, if you're not a GMP customer and you don't get their free equipment, there's Burlington Electric is using Webasto chargers as well, I believe. And if you don't want one that's connected to the internet, or you don't have Wi-Fi in your garage and you just want a basic charger, Clipper Creek is one that a lot of folks use. Go ahead.
That's what I have. I have the Clipper Creek.
Yep. So there are many other options out there. So happy to talk more offline if someone has a question about that. Someone
Many cars also come with cords too. So like when I first got my Tesla, I used the cord. I had a special outlet, but if you're not driving a whole lot, you can even do level 1, just wall outlet. You're only driving a few miles a day on average too. So just reduce the cost for some people.
So next question, someone is having trouble locating an EV to test drive and purchase. So how did folks find their cars? It is true that sometimes dealers don't have great inventory, especially right now with some of the COVID disruptions. There may be some delays in getting restocked since some of the factories have been shut down. But if you contact, you can go to our website, and we have a dealer listing of all the EV dealers in the state, and you can check their inventory, and you can reach out to us directly if there's a particular, at Drive Electric Vermont, if there's a particular model that you're interested in that you're having trouble finding, and we can try to help you locate it. There are, for Teslas, there are Tesla showrooms at the locations that Michael mentioned earlier, Montreal, the kind of Albany area and Boston area, where you can test drive, and there are some local owners who may be willing to share, so some different options there.
Tesla also offers something unique too, of a 7-day return policy, which seems kind of insane, but they do honor that. So I bought my car without a test drive, but so if you're unhappy, some reason you can return it.
Yep. So next question, someone saying, my house has 100 amp electric service. Will I need to upgrade to install a level 2 charger? I would say it's certainly a possibility. You basically need a 40 amp circuit, maybe 40 amp, 240 volts, so a dual pole breaker. So if your panel is totally full right now, you're gonna need to do something. Maybe in some cases, folks might put in a sub panel or something like that. So rather than changing the whole service. I don't know if any of the panelists have thoughts on that. Best thing I could say is talk to an electrician. That's really the main thing, I think, on that. But anyone want to add anything?
I have talked with customers that haven't been able to install a charger because of their service. You know, some rural Vermonters have had to use public charging because they couldn't put in a charger at home.
So yeah, Dave, there was a company that came through the startup accelerator that was hosted by the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund that makes a unit that goes between the panel and the meter that would allow you to install a station even if your panel's maxed out. And so we've done only a handful of installations, but it is an option. And so if anyone's having an issue with that, definitely reach out, and I can give that info to Dave, so you can get in touch, and we can provide you with a link or a contact with an electrician to get one of those installed.
Great, thanks. So question, is there a lower off-peak electric rate for the homeowner? So talked a little bit about this. It's going to depend on your utility. Some of them have it. If you're not sure, would recommend contacting them directly. But we have heard that GMP is in the process of working on that. Yeah,
and just quickly, David, depending on how what percentage of your whole home usage the EV charging represents, even in instances where your utility doesn't offer an EV specific rate, it might make sense to go onto a whole home time of use rate, where you could save money even if you weren't shifting your other uses from on-peak to off-peak, just because the charging represents such a large share of total consumption.
Right. So next question, how do the drivers use their maximum range, and how often do the drivers use their maximum range in a single day? For me personally, it's maybe a handful of times a year. It's pretty rare that I'm driving more than 200 miles in my electric car. About the rest of you?
Yeah, same here as Andy. That's about the same for us.
Yeah, also might say maybe 10 times a year for those road trips that I mentioned. But yeah, even getting to Montreal, I can do that without using a full charge. And the picture that was showed up in the slide was my car plugged in at a friend's garage in Montreal over the weekend. So they also have a ton of public charging stations all throughout the city. So a lot of points of interest near Vermont where you can get to and not have to worry so much about charging along the way.
Yep. So someone asking, thinking about road trips, any news of future DC fast charging across New Hampshire and Maine? They ended up buying a Prius Prime instead of a Bolt because of the charging situation there. And all Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and many other states are investing the Volkswagen diesel settlement funds, a portion of those, into building out more charging infrastructure. So Maine is probably the furthest along on that process, but New Hampshire and Vermont have both done RFPs. So it's not there yet, but hopefully in the next year, maybe 2 years, given some potential COVID delays, we should see a lot more fast charging as a result of those investments. So someone asking, I have a 1-year-old Leaf on a 2-year lease. Would you suggest purchasing at the end of the lease or getting a new vehicle? I guess it really just depends on, if the vehicle is working for you and you got a pretty good deal, you can check when you set up the lease, the residual value is what you will pay to buy it out at the end. So would certainly pay close attention to that residual value as your lease end is approaching, and look at the other EVs that are available used and see, it may not be worth it if your residual value is higher than the market value, which is a possibility. But a lot of folks like to hang on to the vehicle if they're enjoying it, and so that's definitely a viable option to consider. Someone asking about, could Vermont allow EVs to use their batteries for energy storage for the grid to help store energy from wind or electric? And Graham, do you want to take that?
Sure. So I guess two-part question, because one of those would be, I think, shifting charging to the middle of the day or to times when renewable generation is high. And that is absolutely possible today, and something that we do a form of by shifting charging away from evening peaks, which in the region at least are characterized by higher emissions. And so when we are able to push charging later by calling one of those events that I mentioned before, or if you are able to do so by scheduling charging to happen, it will be lower emission energy. I think the second part of that is that vehicle to grid or vehicle to home is very much on the horizon. And so that would be not only shifting charging, but also being able to discharge from the battery of the vehicle back into the grid or into the home. And we're talking to a few different vendors that they have a proposed solution. I think UL certification is a bit of a challenge, but we're really hopeful that within, I don't want to speculate, but maybe 2 years, we could see some prototypes in Vermont and start testing.
Great, thanks, Graham. So we're past 8:15. I think we're going to have to. We still have a bunch of good questions here, so I'll be following up with the panelists. We'll try to provide some kind of summary responses, and as I said, we'll be happy to follow up individually offline for any questions that we haven't gotten to. I did want to quickly respond to a question about whether Burlington Electric Department has income caps on their incentives. So the state incentive program is the only one that has an income screening requirement right now. Some of the utility incentives do have caps on the price of the vehicle. So I don't remember exactly what it is for BED off the top of my head, but I believe they do have a cap on the vehicle price. So they're not going to provide an incentive for a $100,000 luxury EV, I don't believe. And I don't any of my panelist friends here, any parting thoughts before we sign off?
No, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for listening, everyone. I was not joking about the test drive. If you have trouble finding a dealer or just want a slightly lower stress environment to test an EV, just let me know, and I'm happy to drop off the car for as long as you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm willing to do something similar to it. I have to see with all the COVID stuff, but yeah, reach out to me too. I can show the car. I love doing that, and make some driving there. And people say about things about the Tesla smile. It's real. I smile every time I get in the car. Seems crazy, but it's true.
Yeah, it's definitely the case that most people who get an electric car decide, they never want to drive anything else. And I think that's especially true with Tesla, but it's not unique to them. So a lot of folks find that they work great and the performance is better than a gasoline car. They're quieter, more fun to drive. So a lot of good reasons to go electric. One last, somebody put in a message here that in terms of finding an EV to test drive, might want to look into Turo, which is sort of like an Airbnb for rental cars, turo.com, Turo.com. I know they do have some Teslas in the Burlington area that are available for rent on a daily basis. And there have been some other EVs available through there. But right now with COVID, I'm not sure some of those there may not be as much available through there as there has been in the past, but something to consider. So thanks so much everybody for joining, and we look forward to perhaps doing another one of these in the coming weeks as we adjust to doing our outreach virtually, and hope you all have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.